So the Supermang is back together and we're ready to try and make some power. Now, there have been a couple little changes since, with the reassembly of the Supermang. Obviously, it's got new rings, new bearings, all that stuff. It's got the same cam that it had before. It has the same top pulley as it had before, but now it has a larger bottom pulley, which means we're running 5% more or 5%, it's 5% overdriven, basically. So we're going to have a little bit more boost. Not much, just a little bit. So it will be interesting to see how much of a difference that makes. We are also on 100% E85. If you wind the clocks way back to our last dyno session with the VN, we had like E60. So only 60% ethanol because we had too much 98 in the tank. Well, now we've been running E85 for quite a while, so it's got a full load of fresh E85, well, fresh-ish. It's got enough E85 in it. So there's also 8-rib pulley on it now, so should not have any belt slip. Pretty keen to see what it'll make. Last time we had it here, it made 205 rear wheel kilowatts. So what's that, 275 rear wheel horsepower? If we can get it to 300 rear wheel horsepower, I'll be stoked. That would be awesome. So Zane's going to come in here, work his magic. It feels a little bit different, so something's changed. So hopefully, he can find a little bit more out of it, and we can hit that 300 rear wheel horsepower mark. That would be awesome. And then once we've done that, well, we'll head to the track. But first, dyno time. So we've run the VN up on the dyno and we have good news and we've got bad news. The good news is it's made a new PB. It found an extra 0.5 kilowatt. That's right, extra 0.5 kilowatt. However, the bad news is it's got an extra pound of boost in it, so it should be making more than an extra 0.5 kilowatt. But we're hitting that point where it's making so much inlet temperature, that extra boost is making the engine so hot, or the inlet temperature so hot, that it is really hurting the power. So at some point very soon, we're gonna have to put an intercooler in this thing, just to calm the intake temps down. The other problem we're having right now is that the trans is getting hot. So before now, we have not had a transcooler in this thing. We thought we'd get away with it for a little bit, but unfortunately, that is not the case. So needs a transcooler before we take it racing. Hopefully the auto isn't totally cooked. Hopefully we can get at least some passes out of it on the drag strip with a transcooler, and then we'll go searching for more power, but obviously adding an intercooler before we do that. So first things first, we need to find out where the trans leak's coming from, probably the transmission somewhere. But yeah, it's definitely leaking some trans fluid onto the headers. Don't know where that's coming from. So it's got to go back to our workshop, back up on the hoist, sort out the leak, put a trans cooler in it, and then we take it racing. Alrighty, let's get it on the hoist. So we have had a bit of a leak up here. You can see there's evidence of trans fluid here, a little bit on the pan, and I think I haven't quite nipped up the trans lines enough. So I'll have to get my hands up in there somehow, nip them up a little bit tighter, and then clean all this transmission fluid off. But we're also going to dump the trans fluid because obviously we've probably cooked it. So we'll dump the old trans fluid out. We're also going to remove the pan, put a new filter kit in it, just to keep everything hunky-dory. Fresh fluid, and then we'll work our way up front and put in a trans cooler. That's the plan. All right, I think that is tight enough now. It wasn't mega loose, but just enough that it would weep a little bit, so, and certainly squirt out under pressure. All right, well, that part's done. Let's whip this pan off. Well, this is where our shiny little trans pan is very handy because it has a drain plug. And I have shifter. Yeah, fluid looks all right actually. Fresh fluid never hurts. Great. Now I have to pee. Little bit of glitter, but not excessive by any means. Magnets picked up a bit of stuff, but again, not terrible. Okay, so transpan's all clean, magnet's all clean, that's pretty much ready to go on. I'm not going to renew the gasket because the gasket is in pretty good condition anyway. And we've stuck it to the pan pretty well. So always stick them to the pan, not to the trans, and that way it makes them easy to reuse. Right, well, let's whack the filter out of this thing, replace that, then we'll get that back up on it. No bolts on these ones, they're a straight pull them down, bang, whack the other one up there. Now, I'm not going to replace the O-ring, I think we'll be fine. Stick that up in there. Okay, cool. Just wipe that gasket. Get the pan on. Okay. Just thread them in by hand. Make sure they're sweet, and then we'll break out the Ryobi. We don't want to cross thread anything, that's for sure. So now that we've done our transmission servicing, we haven't put the fluid back in yet because we're going to do a transcooler. That's right. So what I'm going to do is whip out the thermofan and I'm going to mount it to the back side of the radiator, but between the radiator and the thermofan. So the thermofan will be drawing air through it. I think that is probably the most convenient place for us to put it. So we'll whip out this thermofan and get to work. Power steering out of the way. So much room for activities. Ta-da! Alrighty, so if we mount it there-ish, that'll probably work. After reading the very comprehensive instructions, decided to amend my plans. It recommends running the cooler in series with the radiator cooler. So I was going to just bypass the radiator cooler, but it says using the radiator cooler to do an initial cool down's good. And then you run it through your external cooler, even better. Then back to the trans for nice cool transmission fluid. Also recommends putting it in front of the radiator or condenser. We've got a condenser here in front of our radiator. It wants the cooler right out front, so I guess we should look at doing that. So I'm going to have to remove this grill, give us some room to work with, and see if we can do it that way. Well, there is a lot of room there as well, so I don't think putting this in there will hurt our plans for an intercooler. If we mount it something like that, should be fine. So I was just looking up where our trans lines go in and out of the trans and seeing which is feed and which is return. So we worked out that the top line that goes into the Turbo 700 is the return, the bottom line is the feed, so it feeds the transcooler basically. So we traced it through and realised that we've run it to the bottom of the radiator, which is incorrect. So the feed line should go to the top. Apparently if you're trying to force it in through the bottom, it creates extra pressure as you're trying to force the fluid up through the radiator and through the internal transcooler, and it can cause extra pressure and more problems. And maybe that's what we did. Maybe that's why we had a bit of a leak there. So if we'd actually ran the lines the other way around, we probably would have had less problems. But anyway, so what we're going to do is going to run our feed line to the top of the radiator, and then the bottom line will run out into our transcooler, and then from the transcooler it'll go back into our return line. That's the plan now. Alrighty. Alright, we'll use those clamps. I like to double clamp transmission lines. Just because you don't want a transmission line coming loose, ever. Fluid burns really easy and it just gets everywhere. So what I'm going to do is connect or loop basically the lines it's just one line at the moment. I'm going to attach one to either end of the transcooler, but these are 5/16 lines and they are 3/8 barbs. I can make them work, but it's just going to take a lot of pushing and prodding and that sort of thing, and I may even have to heat these up slightly in hot water. But easier to do here on the bench than try and do it once the transcooler is up there on the car. And then I can just feed that loop through the car and snip it off where I need it. It's the easiest way to do it. All right, I might run that under the hot water tap for a sec. All right, so I've put some heat into the lines with the hot water. Make sure I've got my hose clamps on, otherwise it's going to be really painful to deal with later. Bit of silicone spray, which of course cools the hose down a little bit. All right. All right, this side. Okay, there we have it. 5/16 hose on 3/8 barbs. A little bit of effort, but now we don't have to deal with issues with it leaking. All right, we'll tighten these up. So we've got our hose clamps all tightened. It's pretty much ready to go. Now I just need to create a bit of space here between the radiator and the condenser. So what I'm going to do is just lift the radiator slightly. Bump it forward just a tad. Right, so we'll stick that through there. It's on jobs like these that you really appreciate having a hoist, and our Tecalmat hoists are awesome. Get that roughly lined up with where we want it. All right. Where do we want it? There-ish, maybe? So there's little rubber adhesive pads which are there to protect the condenser from the transcooler, and then we've got these little plastic rods to push through just as a way of holding it in place. All right, let's work this out. So that one's got to go through there. So now I know the locations. I can feed them through on the back side. So I may have done that wrong on those ones, just because I've come through this way, which I thought would be the better way, but because of the clearance on the actual transcooler, the big disc is a bit fat, where those have flat sides on them, and therefore they will probably fit in there a lot better. So we'll do that with these ones. So now the top two are located. Put our pads in the bottom. Okay, we're getting there. All right, so now we're just going to pull all them tight and we will be spot on. Okay, that is solid as. Pretty happy with that. Of course, the best part of this is it's all made in Australia. So I'm really impressed with this kit actually. It's got, you know, like I said, made in Australia. It's got good hose clamps, good lines. It all seems to work pretty well. The fitting kit is really good as well, where, you know, we've used these plastic ties before, some of the cheaper stuff, and it just fails as soon as you put it in. Well, this feels nice and solid. I'm very happy with it. So would buy again and will do. All right, just trim the excess. Radiator back in place. There we go. So top hose. Come out, go round. There. This one's got to go in here. Okay, well, that's it, just about done. We've got to do thermofan back in, which is a 5-minute job. Put some trans fluid in it, and that's it. Bingo bango. Oh, and grill. And we can take it out for a test run. Okay, now time for some fluid.